Hello everyone! So in this video, our topic will be corporate liquidation. So we will liquidate a corporation. So the concept is almost the same with partnership liquidation. So, but compared to partnership, corporation are unlikely to liquidate unless the corporation became insolvent. So what do you mean by insolvent? So a corporation is considered insolvent if its liabilities exceeds their assets. So mas malaki yung liabilities compared their assets. And a corporation cannot pay all of its liabilities. So what are the options of a corporation if it becomes insolvent? So there are two options. So according to the Insolvency Act of the Philippines, a corporation, if it became insolvent, may liquidate. That is, they will terminate their operation. And whatever available resources or assets, it will be paid to the creditors of the corporation. But compared to partnership, is if you remember, the creditors of the partnership can run after the personal assets of the partners, right? However, in a corporation, the creditors of the corporation cannot run after the personal assets of the shareholders. Diba, one of the characteristics of a corporation is that the shareholders have limited liability. So their liability is only to the extent of their contribution. So once exhausted na yung contribution nila, so yun lang. The creditors cannot run after the personal assets of the shareholders. Okay? So that's one option of the corporation to liquidate or to terminate their operation. The second one is to reorganize. So we will make a separate video for corporate reorganization. So in this video, we will discuss the corporate liquidation. So the corporate liquidation, same lang ng concept sa partnership liquidation. It is the termination of business operation. So stop yung operation natin or winding up of affairs. So it is the process by which assets of the business are converted into cash. So ibebenta yung mga assets to generate cash. Then once may available cash na, so the liabilities of the business will be settled or paid. Then if may excess or sobra, any remaining amount will be distributed to the owners. Okay? So that's basically the concept of liquidation. Again, we generate cash by selling the assets, then pay the liabilities, and then distribute any amount or any remaining amount to the owners. Measurement basis. The PFRS are only applicable to entities which are of going concern. So, di ba, assumptions of accounting is going concern. So, ano nga yung concept ng going concern? Entities are assumed to operate in an indefinite period of time, right? So, hindi natin alam kung kailan hanggang kailan mag-ooperate yung business. That's why in our financial reports, specifically the balance sheet, we classify our assets as well as our liabilities into current and non-current. So current asset siya or liability if it is within 1 year or within operating cycle, and then once beyond 1 year operating cycle, it will be classified as non-current asset, right? However, in case business is terminated or liquidated, The measurement basis prescribed by the conceptual framework as well as the PFRS will not be applicable to liquidating entities. Why? Because hindi na applicable yung going concern assumption basis natin. Because, di ba, under going concern, they will be, it is assumed that they will operate indefinitely. But once terminated na yung business, so hindi na applicable to. So ang tawag nga sa ibang author ito is, instead na going concern, ang gagamitin na concept is the quitting concern. So for liquidating entities, ang gagamitin is quitting concern. So accordingly, for entities undergoing liquidation, the appropriate measurement basis is the realizable value. Diba sa going concern, ang ginagamit natin in measuring our assets and liabilities is the historical cost, right? Then less any impairment or depreciation. However, in quitting concern or for those entities undergoing liquidation, ang gagamitin natin is the realizable value. Hindi na yung carrying amount or book values. So for assets, ang realizable value ng asset is the estimated selling price less estimated cost to sell. Diba? In liquidation, ibebenta natin yung assets. That's why we need to determine how much is the realizable value. How much cash will we receive if we sell the asset. Of course, less estimated cost to sell. So, yung net amount na lang na marireceive natin. So, for liabilities, the realizable value is the expected net settlement amount. Yung amount na ibabayad natin sa creditors. So, the historical cost, the carrying amount, book values will be irrelevant in corporate liquidation. So, ang relevant na value natin will be the realizable value. Okay? In accounting for corporate liquidation, we also have financial reports that will be prepared. One is the statement of affairs, and second is the statement of liquidation and realization. So, ang statement of affairs, this is the initial report prepared at the start of the liquidation process. It shows the financial position of the liquidating entity, the assets that are available for sale, the claims of the creditors to be settled, and the claims of owners. So actually, the statement of affairs is somewhat similar to the balance sheet. So, makikita mo yung assets, the liabilities, as well as the equity. However, instead na current at non-current yung classification ng assets at liabilities natin, iba yung classification ng assets at liabilities. Right? So, instead na current at non-current assets, assets are classified into 3. So, di ba sa balance sheet natin, sa asset portion, we divided it into current at non-current. But in the statement of affairs, we classify them into 3. Assets pledged to fully secured creditors, assets pledged to partially secured creditors, and the free assets. So, what are these type of assets? So, yung una, assets pledged to fully secured creditors, these are assets with realizable values equal or greater than the related liability for which these assets have been pledged as security. So, ano ba yung ibig sabihin nitong assets pledge? So, for example, umutang ka sa bank, so may loans payable ka amounting to 1 million. Then, upon acquiring the loan, may security na ni-require si bank. So, for example, yung land mo, ginawa mo siyang security to acquire the loan. Ang book value ng land is assuming 2 million, then ang fair value niya is 1.5 million or realizable value. So, how will we classify this land? Will we classify it as assets pledged to fully secured, partially secured, or free assets? So, simply, just compare the realizable value versus the amount of liability. So, no need to look at the book value of the land because that will be irrelevant. What you need to determine is the realizable value of the asset. Okay? So, you compare the realizable value versus the amount of liability. So, in this case, the realizable value of the land is greater than the amount of liability. Meaning, may sobra pa. Okay? So, this land will be classified as assets pledged to fully secured creditors because tinawag siyang fully secured because all of this amount, 1 million, will be paid. Meaning, fully secured yung liability natin. Fully secured si bank. Okay? On the contrary, assets pledged to partially secured creditors, so these are assets with realizable value less than the related liabilities. So, kabaliktaran siya sa ating first example. So, if in case the realizable value of the land is only 900,000 versus the loan payable na 1 million. So, yung utang mo is 1 million pero yung value ng land is only 900,000. So, meaning, mas maliit yung value ng mas maliit yung realizable value ng land kaysa sa amount ng liability. So, kung ikaw yung bank, hindi secured yung kung mababayaran ba lahat ng 1 million. Okay? But, in reality, no bank will receive securities or pledge that is less than the amount of liability. But for the sake of example, yun nga, mas maliit yung realizable value ng land. So, meaning, hindi secured totally yung loans of the bank. So, yung secured lang is only to the extent of 900,000. So, yung 100,000, hindi pa sure na mababayaran ba. Okay? So, this land, for this example, will be classified as assets pledged to partially secured creditors. Then, the last classification of asset will be the free assets. So, simple lang, these are assets that have not been pledged to any liabilities. So, kaya tinawag silang free assets. We then proceed to the classification of liabilities. So, we have 4 fully secured liabilities, partially secured liabilities, unsecured liabilities with priority, unsecured liabilities without priority. But actually, there are only 2 major classification of these liabilities. Secured, itong first 2, and then second 2 is the unsecured. So, secured, may security, then ito, walang security. But we further classified them into 4. So, yung first 2 natin, though secured silang, secured yung dalawa, yung isa is fully, but yung isa is partial lang. So, what do you mean by fully secured liabilities? So, these are liabilities secured by assets with realizable value equal or greater than the value of such liabilities. Meaning, ito yung liabilities na may security Tapos yung assets that serves as security is greater than the amount of liability. So for example, dito sa example natin kanina, di ba mas malaki yung realizable value ng land kaysa sa amount ng liability natin, which is the loans payable. So the land will be classified as assets pledged to fully secured creditors, and then the accompanying liability will be classified as fully secured liabilities. So partner tong dalawa. Fully assets pledged to fully secured, then the fully secured liabilities. So the asset will be classified as this one, and the related liability, since fully secured siya because mas malaki yung value ng asset, so meaning secured na matatanggap ng bank lahat ng 1 million. Because if the land will be sold and will generate the amount of 1.5 million, the amount of 1 million will be paid in full. May sobra pa. Kaya the related liability will be classified as fully secured liabilities. Right? Itong isa naman, yung partially secured liabilities, ito yung sa second example natin. If in case the realizable value of land is less than the amount of the loans payable, so hindi secured si bank if mababayaran ba siya in full, because ang estimated na ma-generate lang na cash natin in case ibebenta yung land will be 900,000. So paano yung remaining 100,000? That's why the land is classified as assets pledged to partially secured creditors, and the related liability will be classified as partially secured because partial lang yung security ng asset that serves as the security for the loan. Okay? So, partner tong number 1, then partner din tong number 2. Then, the third and the fourth one, pareho silang unsecured. But, mas advantage tong number 3 natin because mas priority siya. Mas una siyang babayarin compared to the fourth type of liability. Okay? So these are liabilities that although not secured by any asset, so walang asset that serves as pledge or security, but mandated by law to be paid first before any other unsecured liabilities. So more or less, there are 3 examples of unsecured liabilities with priority. First is the administrative expenses. So these are filing fees, attorney fees, referee fees, trustees fees, and wages and commissions of personnel directly involved in arranging the commencement of the insolvency proceedings. So these are the costs incurred upon liquidation. Okay? The second one is the unpaid employees' salaries and other benefits. Siyempre, dapat mong bayaran yung mga employees na hindi pa nasusweldohan. Then last, of course, hindi pa tatalo yung government natin. Dapat, in case may due ka pa na payables to the government, so dapat bayarin mo rin. Example niyan is the taxes and assessments, whether local or national government. So those are examples of unsecured liabilities with priority. Then last but not the least, yung pinakamasakit, unsecured na, so di pa priority. So these are liabilities, so based on this definition, that are not classifiable under 1, 2, and 3. Or simply, these are liabilities that is not secured with any asset. So walang asset na nag-serve as security. Then hindi rin sila priority. Di ba? Ang sakit. So those are the classifications of our liabilities. Let's have an example to better understand what have been discussed. So let's proceed to the second page. So the PDF file of this material is also available in the description below. So kindly download na lang po. So given po sa problem 1 natin, so si AA company petition for bankruptcy and is now in the process of preparing a statement of affairs. So if you notice, AA company has its assets and liabilities as well as shareholders equity here. So we have the carrying amount as well as the realizable value of the assets. So undergoing concern assumption, so diba, we present it according to current and non-current asset as well as our liabilities, right? And then syempre, since nagpetition na for bankruptcy, so normally ang ang shareholders equity ng company will show a deficit or a negative balance of retained earnings of 233,400. Okay, so the requirement is how much should each type of creditors will receive in case of liquidation. So how will we compute the estimated payment to these types of creditors? So simple lang, but first we need to, ang first step nito is we need to classify each assets and liabilities based on what have been discussed earlier. That is, if fully secured ba, partially secured ba, free asset ba, unsecured without priority or with priority. So where should we start? So we start with the first example. So we look at the liability. So if you notice, the notes payable is secured by receivable and inventory. So dalawang asset yung security niya. So the receivable and inventory. So by the way, again, as mentioned earlier, our carrying amount or carrying value will be irrelevant. So what we need to determine is the realizable value. So we compare this realizable value to the amount of liability. So if you notice, the receivable and inventory with a total of 65,000 serves as a collateral for our notes payable. Question is, the notes payable has a accompanying interest. So should we include the interest? Kasali kaya sa security yung interest natin? So if you remember sa law subject natin, the interest always follows with the principal unless otherwise it is specifically stated there na hindi kasali yung interest sa collateral. Okay? But silent yung problem natin, so we add the interest. So the total liability will be 126,000. So we write here the assets realizable value, compare natin sa liability natin. So yung asset natin is the receivable and inventory with a realizable value of 65,000. Right? Then the amount of liability is 126. So if you notice, mas malaki yung liability natin, right? So in this case, our asset, this one, receivable and inventory, will be classified as assets pledged to partially secured liability because our liability is secured only to the extent of 65,000, right? because mas maliit yung asset that serves as the collateral or security. Okay, then on the second one, we have also a bonds payable. So ito is partially secured liability. So actually, ang importante dyan is you need to know what is the classification of that liability. Then madali na yung classification of the related asset. So for our bonds payable, same pa rin, may interest. So ang total liability natin is 157,000. Then it was secured by land and building. So magkano ba yung realizable value ng land and building? So ang total nila is 170,000. So land and building 170,000. So obviously mas malaki yung asset natin, meaning this liability or bonds payable is considered as fully secured. Again, because mas malaki yung asset that serves as collateral or security. Okay? So this is classified as fully secured liability. So the related asset, land and building, will be classified as assets pledged to fully secured liabilities or creditors. Okay, di ba? Ang dali. Then so far wala na. So yung remaining asset natin na hindi ginamit as collateral will be classified as free asset, like ng cash at equipment. Okay? We also have liabilities here that has no collateral. So these are considered as unsecured liabilities. But these three here will be prioritized. So these are unsecured liabilities with priority. This because these are wages, taxes, and liquidation expenses. So ito yung diniscuss natin kanina that are priority. Okay? And then the remaining liability, which is the accounts payable, since wala nang given, so it is classified as unsecured liability without priority. So ito yung challenging part sa corporate liquidation. Dapat alam mo yung classification of each asset and liability. But once ma-master mo yung classification, the rest will follow. Mas madali na. So to make it more easier, I'll also give here a formula to guide you in answering corporate liquidation. So para siyang T-account, because we need to compute the estimated recovery percentage, especially for partially secured creditors. Sige lang, we will use this problem and then we'll apply this formula that we prepare. So sa formula natin, we need to identify our free assets. So ano nga yung free assets natin? 'Di ba? If we go back to our problem, yung free asset natin is the cash amounting to 20,000. And we also have equipment 80,000. Okay? So careful ha, dapat yung gamitin natin yung realizable value, because once you use the carrying value, so mali na. So better cross out na lang yung carrying value para hindi kayo ma-mislead. The next one is the what we call the free portion of assets fully pledged. So ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng free portion of assets fully pledged? So this is in case if the asset is greater than the related liability. So yung assets pledged to fully secured creditors, right? So di ba yung free portion, ito yung excess ng realizable value ng asset over its liabilities. Because the excess portion of that assets will be used to pay the unsecured creditors. Sa example natin kanya, di ba? Yung realizable value ng land natin is 1.5 million. And then yung loan natin is 1 million. So may sobra na 500,000. Hindi ibibigay yung 500,000 sa bank. The bank will receive only 1 million. The excess of 500,000 will be used to pay the unsecured liabilities. Right? So ito yung tinatawag na free portion. Again, this is the excess of the asset over the related liability. So we need to look at the assets pledged to fully secured creditors. So in our problem, di ba ito yun? Yung realizable value ng land at building is 170. Yung amount ng bonds payable natin is 157. So may sobra pa na magkano? 13,000. So this 13,000 is what we call the free portion. So the free portion will be used to pay our unsecured creditors. Okay? So add natin yung free assets plus the free portion, makukuha natin yung total free assets. So 20 plus 80 plus 13, we have 113,000. So ito yung total free assets or assets available to all unsecured creditors. Right? Then after that, we deduct the unsecured liabilities with priority. Okay? So, di ba, ito yung available to all unsecured creditors. Siyempre, babayarin una yung priority, which are the administrative expenses, the salaries, as well as the taxes and assessments. So, based on our problem, our unsecured liabilities with priority are the wages, amounting to 21,300, right? These are the wages. We also have taxes amounting to 10,000. Then we also have liquidation expenses amounting to 9,100. So ito 'yon. 21, 10,000 at 9,100. Unsecured liabilities with priority. So, di ba? Assets available to all unsecured liabilities. Bayarin natin una yung priority. So, yung sobra after mabayaran yung with priority, ito na yung available assets to unsecured liabilities without priority, or what we called as the net free assets. So again, these are assets available to unsecured liabilities without priority. So ang net free assets is also called as assets available to unsecured without priority because nabayaran na yung mga priority na liabilities. While the total free asset is also known as the assets available to all unsecured. Again, all unsecured. Then deduct yung with priority, ang balance natin will be available for non-priority claims. So magkano ba yung net free assets natin? So deduct mo lang yung tatlo, that will be 72,600. Okay? So yung total ng tatlo is 40,400. Then on the right part of our formula, we need to compute the unsecured liabilities without priority and the unsecured portion. So first, magkano ba yung unsecured liabilities without priority? So sa classification kanina, only the accounts payable is classified as the unsecured liability without priority. Yung walang security or pledge tapos hindi priority. So yung accounts payable. So accounts payable amounting to 60,000. Unsecured liability without priority. Okay? Then add natin yung unsecured portion. So ano ba yung unsecured portion? So kanina, 'di ba, dito sa ating formula, ang free portion is the excess of asset over the liability. Right? Ito naman yung opposite nito. So this is the excess of liability over the related asset. So sa second example kanina, 'di ba, in case the realizable value of land is only 900,000, so may sobra pa na 100,000 na sa loans natin na hindi secured. So yun yung unsecured portion. Okay? So ito yung mas malaki yung liability kaysa sa asset. So the excess of liability over the related asset. Ito yung unsecured portion. So based sa classification natin kanina, 'di ba, ito 'yon. The notes payable. So yung notes payable natin is 126,000, pero yung asset that serves as security is only 65,000. So that's why it was classified as partially secured. So may unsecured portion tayo na magkano? 126 minus 165, that is 61,000. So ito yung unsecured portion. Okay, I hope you are following. So actually, opposite lang tong dalawang to. So balikan ko ha. These are free assets or assets that have not been pledged to any liabilities. Yung opposite niya is those liabilities that has no assets pledged. Okay? Ito yung free portion na excess ng asset over liability. Ito yung excess of liability over the asset that serves as the collateral. Okay? Then, add mo lang yung dalawa. Yung total natin is 121,000. So, ito yung total unsecured liability. Yung total liabilities na walang security. So, including the unsecured portion. Okay? So, why do we need to compute the net free assets as well as the total unsecured liabilities? Because we need to compute the estimated recovery percentage. So what is the formula for estimated recovery percentage? Simply net free assets divided by our total unsecured liabilities. So, magkano yung net free assets natin? 72,600 divide by 121,000. That is 60%. So, ano bang ibig sabihin nito, 60%? For every peso of our liability, they will receive 60% of it. Meaning, 60 cents per peso. So, kung may, for example, ikaw yung inutangan, may inutang sa'yo na 10 pesos. So, yung estimate na ma-receive mo is 60% or 6 pesos. Yun yung meaning ng estimated recovery percentage. So, this is applicable only to those liabilities that have no securities or partial lang yung security ng asset. Okay? Yung difference naman, di ba, yung quotient natin, ang quotient ng dalawa is tinatawag na estimated recovery percentage. The difference between the two is also termed as estimated deficiency to unsecured creditors. Meaning, the amount of deficiency, yung amount of asset na kulang para mabayaran lahat ng unsecured liabilities natin. So, this is called as the estimated deficiency. The difference between the net free assets and the total unsecured liabilities. So, magkano yung difference? That is 48,400. So, kulang tayo ng 48,400 na asset para mabayaran lahat ng total unsecured liabilities. So, yun yung estimated deficiency to unsecured liabilities. Okay? So, once we compute the recovery percentage, we can now compute the amount of settlement per creditors. So, for example, first is the fully secured. Magkano ba yung, di ba yung liability natin for fully secured is, di ba ito yung bonds payable, 157, right? The bonds payable. So, since fully secured siya, so the amount to be paid, cash paid, will be equal to the liability, which is 157. So, fully secured creditors will be paid in full. Of course, kaya nga tinawag silang fully secured creditors. They will receive full of their claims. So, yung percentage niya is 100%. Okay? However, for our partially secured creditors, ano ba yung partially secured creditors natin? Itong notes payable. So, our notes payable, ang liability natin is 126, right? Including the interest. Tapos, yung security niya is only 65,000. So, paano mo makukompute yung estimated payment to partially secured creditors? So, simply, yung ang ma-receive or ang mabayaran natin sa partially secured creditors will be the saan ko ba isasulat? Yan lang. The amount of asset that was served as security, which is the receivable and inventory. Siyempre, ibabayad itong 65,000 plus the excess, di ba? May sobra na 126,000 minus 65. Ito yung unsecured portion, right? So, 126 minus 65, meron tayong 61,000 na sobra. So, multiply mo yan sa estimated recovery percentage na na-compute natin kanina, which is 60%. So, 61 times 60% equals 36,600 plus the amount of asset which is 65,000. So yung total ma-receive ng partially secured creditors will be 101,600. Okay? I hope you have followed the amount of asset pledge plus the estimated. So, paano yung estimated? Recovery percentage times the unsecured portion, which is 61,000. So, ang mabayaran, ang yung bayad natin will be 101,600. So, yung utang natin is 126, pero ang mababayaran lang is only 101,600. So, magkano ba yung percentage niyan? 101,600 divided by 126. So, more or less, nasa 80.63%. Okay? How about our unsecured creditors with priority? Diba yung total unsecured with priority natin is 4,400. So, 4,400. Magkano bang ibabayad sa unsecured with priority? Of course, since priority sila, they will be paid in full. Okay? So, wala nang computation. They will receive 100% of their claims. Okay? Then last but not the least are unsecured creditors without priority. So, di ba yung unsecured creditors natin without priority is the accounts payable, which is 60,000. So, simply, yung amount of liability is 60,000, magkano yung ma-receive, multiply mo lang sa 60 times the amount estimated recovery percentage. So, diretso na 36,000. So, kanina, may inad tayo because ito yung partially secured liability. May asset that serve as security. Kaya mas malaki yung natanggap ng partially secured creditors. However, for unsecured without priority, so walang asset na ginamit as security, so ito lang yung matatanggap niya. Itong based sa percentage of recovery. Okay? So, you will receive 36,000. So, as to percentage, equal to our recovery percentage na 60%. Okay? So, if we try to add the total payment, 157 plus 101,600 plus 4,400 plus 36,000, yung sum nila will be 335,000. Okay? Ano ba yung 335,000? Ito yung total realizable value ng lahat ng assets natin. Okay? So, dapat equal yung total realizable value natin sa total payment to all creditors. So, ito yung purpose ng liquidation. We allocate the remaining assets to our creditors. But of course, there will be a ranking to which the said assets will be paid first. Okay? That's why we need to determine the classification of each type of liabilities or creditors. Okay? So, I hope you have followed. We have a second requirement here. How much is estimated deficiency to unsecured creditors? So, simply, yung deficiency natin is the difference between the net free assets and the total unsecured assets. So, magkano yung difference? 72,600 less 121, that is equal to 48,400. Then, as for the last requirement for this problem is to prepare the formal statement of affairs. So actually, this requirement is, the answer for this requirement is already prepared in the next page. So, explain ko lang sandali kung paano pinipare itong statement of affairs. Okay? So, as mentioned earlier, ang format ng statement of affairs is comparable to balance sheet, wherein we have our assets, liabilities, and equity. But what we use is the realizable value. Though we also we present the book values here for formality. But what is relevant is the realizable value of these assets and liabilities. Okay? So, di ba? Wala ng current at non-current asset. Yung classification natin is as to assets pledged to fully secured creditors, assets pledged to partially secured creditors, and free assets. Okay? So, if you notice, kinumbine na natin yung land and building because it was pledged to bonds payable. So, instead na we present it separately. So, in one line item na lang yung land and building, as well as our receivable and inventory. And there's no problem with that. Okay? So, ito yun. So, may pag assets pledged to fully secured, so may excess portion tayo which is 13,000. Right? So, formula natin, ito yung 13,000. Then, of course, pag partially secured creditors, walang excess. Then, we have our free assets. So, parang ito lang yung format sa formula natin kanina. Total free assets, 113,000. Diba ito yun? 113,000. Then, less mo yung with priority, which is I think mali to. Dapat 48, 40, 400. So, we equal to 72,600. Okay? Then, the estimated deficiency, so yung difference ng net free assets at total unsecured liabilities. So, that's for the asset portion. Then, for our liabilities and equity, so, ito yung for classification. So, wala ng current liability at non-current liability. So, we have fully secured liabilities, the bonds payable as well as the interest. We have the partially secured liabilities, the notes payable and its related interest again. So, yung sobra, ito yung unsecured portion. Kanina, di ba? Ito yung 61,000. The unsecured portion. Then, unsecured liabilities with priority, yung tatlo. Then, last is the unsecured liabilities without priority. So, that's why our total unsecured liabilities without priority is 121,000. Equal to the amount here. After adding the estimated deficiency, 48,400. So, ito lang yung format ng statement of affairs natin. Okay? I know that at this time, so medyo nalilito pa kayo for this topic, corporate liquidation. And don't worry, it is very understandable. So, just rewatch the video. So, yung advantage naman nito is you can rewatch it para mas ano ba yun? Mas maintindihan nyo yung topic. And then, if possible, you can also read books or watch other videos. But if you want to continue, so let's try to have another problem here. So we have problem number 2. So if you notice, our problem is much shorter, right? Because our assets here as well as our liabilities has already been classified. Diba sabi ko kanina, ang challenging part sa corporate liquidation is the classifying as to how to classify the assets and liabilities. Pero pag ganitong problem, mas madali na because nakaklasify na yung asset at liability natin. So same pa rin yung requirement, magkano yung settlement for each type of creditors. Okay? So simply, we use our T account here. So ano yung una? Diba yung free asset natin? Crash out na yung book value. We need to use the current value or the realizable value, or in some authors they use fair value. So yung free asset natin, so given na 960,000. Okay, then the free portion, so the free portion, the excess of the asset over the liability for assets pledged to fully secured creditors. So ito yung fully secured assets pledged to fully secured creditors. Ito yung fully secured creditors. So ito yung magpartner. Mas malaki yung asset kaysa sa liability, right? So magkano ba ang difference ng dalawa? So that is 11110 minus 780. We have 330. So that's our free portion. So add lang natin, we have our total free assets amounting to 1,290,000. Okay? Then deduct natin yung unsecured liabilities with priority. So given na din 210,000. So deduct, makuha natin yung net free asset, which is 1,080,000. Down sa kabilang part naman, ang unsecured liability without priority. So magkano ba itong 1,560? So 1,560. Then we also have our unsecured portion. So ano ba yung unsecured portion? If mas malaki yung asset kaysa sa ating mas malaki yung liability kaysa sa asset. So this is for the case of partially secured creditors. So ito yung liability natin, pero yung asset pledge is only 360. So mas malaki yung liability. So magkano yung unsecured portion? 600 less 360. So magkano yan? That is 240. Okay? So kompleto na. So add mo lang ang total unsecured liabilities is 1,800,000. Okay? So our estimated recovery percentage will be 1,080,000 divided by 1.8. That is magkano ba? %60. Okay? So same lang kanina, magkano yung settlement for each type of creditors? Of course, pag fully secured, ito yung fully secured creditors natin, they will receive 100% of their claims. For partially secured creditors, so paano nga ba yun? First, ma-receive na nila yung assets pledge, which is 360, right? Plus the unsecured portion na 240 times the percentage of recovery, which is 60%. So ito yung total na ma-receive nila. So 240 times 60%, that is 144 plus 360. Total ma-receive nila is 504,000. Okay? With priority, so 100% yung ma-receive, 210. They will receive in full. Then last, unsecured without priority, itong 1560. So 1560 times 60%, that is 936. So yun na. Ito yung settlement for each type of creditors. So if you want to double check, add natin yung total payment natin, that is 2,430,000, equal to the total value of our assets. So try natin i-add 11,110 plus 360 plus 960. So same pa rin, 2,430. Okay, so di ba ang dali? Then we also have here what amount of cash will be available to pay unsecured, then non-priority. Unsecured, then non-priority. So the question is referring to our net free asset. Diba? Sabi ko nga kanina, the net free asset is also called as the assets available to unsecured without priority. Ang total free asset naman, ito yung assets available to all unsecured creditors. Okay? So yung answer natin will be 1,080,000. Okay? Then last, we have problem number 3. So mas madali pa rin because the problem is already classified the assets and liabilities. So you can pause the video, then answer on your own. Okay? So once you are done, makukuha mo yung percentage of recovery natin will be 65%. So sundin mo lang yung formula natin. So once you compute the 65%, you will derive the answer, which is 200,200. Okay? So if you got it right, so congratulations, may natutunan ka sa ating video. So if wala, so try to answer again until you arrive on this answer. Okay? So yun lang po sa ating video na to. I hope you have learned something about corporate liquidation. So